I've always been fascinated by old houses. There's something about their creaky floors, dusty corners, and long-forgotten secrets that draws me in. Little did I know that my obsession would lead me to the most horrifying experience of my life. One that would leave me questioning the very nature of reality. It all began when I stumbled upon an ad for a house sale in a small, remote town called Blackwood. The house was a dilapidated Victorian mansion that had stood abandoned for decades. It was a decaying relic of a bygone era. And from the moment I laid eyes on the faded photograph in the ad, I was captivated. The house beckoned to me like a siren's call, and I knew I had to make it mine. After weeks of negotiations and countless phone calls with the real estate agent, I finally held the keys to the mansion in my trembling hand. It was a cold, overcast day when I arrived in Blackwood, and as I approached the house, an eerie sense of foreboding washed over me. The mansion loomed like a sinister sentinel against the gray sky, its windows boarded up, and its once majestic facade marred by time. The front door groaned open as I pushed it, revealing an interior that was frozen in time. Dusty furniture draped in tattered sheets stood like silent sentinels in the dimly lit foyer. I ventured deeper into the house, each step accompanied by the sound of my own heart pounding in my chest. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and the walls seemed to whisper long forgotten secrets. I decided to start my exploration in the basement. The staircase leading down was narrow and steep, and as I descended, the temperature seemed to drop with every step. The basement was a labyrinth of dark corridors, and I could hear the faint drip of water echoing through the darkness. My flashlight cut through the blackness, revealing rusted pipes and crumbling stone walls. As I ventured deeper into the basement, I stumbled upon a wooden door that seemed out of place. It was old and weathered, with a brass handle that felt icy to the touch. With a sense of trepidation, I turned the handle and pushed the door open. What I found inside would haunt my nightmares for years to come. The room was small, barely large enough to stand in. The walls were covered in faded, peeling wallpaper, and in the center of the room, there was a solitary chair, its wooden frame twisted and contorted, as if in agony. But what truly chilled me to the bone was the floor. It was covered in a thick layer of soil, and in the center, there was a crudely dug hole. It was as if someone had attempted to bury something here, something that had clawed its way out. I couldn't tear my eyes away from that hole, and as I stared, I felt a presence in the room with me. The air grew colder, and I could hear the faintest whisper of a voice, like a ghostly sigh. Panic welled up inside me, and I stumbled backward, slamming the door shut. I had to get out of that basement, away from whatever malevolent force lingered there. As I made my way back upstairs, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The house seemed to come alive around me, its walls closing in, its shadows writhing. I needed to leave, to escape the suffocating grasp of the mansion, but something compelled me to stay. That night, as I lay in the bedroom I had chosen on the second floor, I was jolted awake by a sound. It was a low, mournful wail that seemed to seep through the walls themselves. I sat up in bed, my heart racing, and as I strained my ears to listen, I realized that the sound was coming from the basement. It was a voice filled with anguish and despair, and it called out to me in a language I couldn't understand. I couldn't resist the urge to investigate. With my flashlight in hand, I descended into the basement once more. The room with the soil-covered floor was as I had left it, but the door that I had closed was now wide open, as if inviting me in. I stepped through the doorway and into the room, and that's when I saw her. She was a young woman, her spectral form hovering just above the soil-covered floor. Her eyes were hollow, and her hair hung in matted tangles around her face. She wore a tattered white dress that seemed to glow in the darkness. Her pale, translucent fingers reached out to me, and she let out another heart-wrenching wail. "Help me. she whispered, her voice echoing in my mind. "I've been trapped here for so long. Please, you have to help me." I was frozen in place, unable to tear my gaze away from her. It was as if I had stepped into a nightmare, and I couldn't wake up. The room began to shake, and the walls seemed to close in on me, threatening to crush me beneath their weight. I had to get out, had to escape the clutches of this malevolent spirit. With a scream, I turned and ran, sprinting up the stairs and out of the basement. I didn't stop until I was back in my bedroom, gasping for breath. I knew then that I had to leave this cursed house, that I had to get as far away from it as possible. But as I reached for my phone to call for help, I realized that I had no signal. I was completely cut off from the outside world. I spent the night huddled in my bedroom, the wails of the tormented spirit in the basement haunting my every thought. Sleep was impossible, and when morning finally came, I made my way downstairs to find the front door barricaded shut with thick chains and padlocks. I was trapped, imprisoned in this house of horrors. Days turned into weeks, and I was a prisoner in my own home. The malevolent spirit that inhabited the basement seemed to grow stronger with each passing day, her wails echoing through the house, driving me to the brink of madness. I could feel her presence everywhere, her cold fingers brushing against my skin, her mournful voice whispering in my ear. I tried to communicate with her, to find out who she was and what she wanted, but her words were always cryptic, filled with pain and longing. She told me of a terrible crime that had been committed in the house, a crime that had left her soul trapped in a never-ending cycle of torment. She begged me to help her, to set her free, but I had no idea how to do so. As the days stretched into months, I became a mere shadow of my former self. I was plagued by nightmares and sleep deprivation, my body weakened by fear and despair. I knew that I was slowly losing my grip on reality, that the malevolent spirit was consuming me, body and soul. Then, one fateful night, as I lay in my bed, unable to sleep, a revelation washed over me. I had to confront the past, to uncover the truth of the terrible crime that had bound the spirit to this house. I had to find a way to set her free, to end this nightmare once and for all. Armed with determination, I descended into the basement one final time, the room with the soil-covered floor calling to me. The spirit was there, her form more solid and distinct than ever before. I reached out to her to touch her cold, ethereal hand. "I'll help you," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "I'll find out what happened, and I'll set you free." For the first time, I saw a glimmer of hope in her empty eyes, and she nodded in gratitude. With her guidance, I began to uncover the dark history of the house, a history that was steeped in tragedy and violence. It was a tale of betrayal and murder, a tale that had left the spirit trapped in a never-ending cycle of torment. As I delved deeper into the past, I realized that the key to setting the spirit free lay in confronting the malevolent force that had bound her here. It was a force that thrived on fear and despair, a force that fed on the suffering of the living. I knew that I had to face it head-on, to challenge its power with the strength of my own will. The final confrontation was a battle of wills, a battle that tested the very limits of my courage and resolve. The malevolent force raged against me, unleashing a torrent of terror and despair. But I refused to back down, refusing to let fear control me any longer. With a final, desperate scream, I confronted the malevolent force, forcing it to release its grip on the spirit. As the force dissipated into nothingness, the spirit let out a cry of release, her form dissolving into a shower of ethereal light. In that moment, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me, as if a heavy weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The house, once filled with malevolence and despair, was now calm and still. The wails of the tormented spirit had finally ceased, and I knew that she had found the peace she had longed for. I had fulfilled my promise to her, setting her free from the chains that had bound her to this world. But the price of that freedom had been high. I had endured unspeakable terror and faced a malevolent force beyond my understanding. The experience had left scars on my soul that would never fully heal. I knew that I could never truly escape the haunted past of that house, that it would haunt me for the rest of my days. As I left Blackwood behind, I couldn't help but look back one last time at the decaying Victorian mansion. It stood as a silent sentinel, a monument to the horrors I had witnessed within its walls. The haunted past of that house would forever be etched into my memory, a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk in the most unexpected of places. And as I drove away, I couldn't help but wonder how many other houses held similar secrets. How many other tormented spirits were trapped in a never-ending cycle of despair. The world was a far more mysterious and terrifying place than I had ever imagined, and I had glimpsed a darkness that would haunt me for the rest of my days.